Hello, and welcome to my channel. Hey everyone, welcome back to Andrew's Wizardly Reads, and today I have got another book review for you. Now, before we get into that book review, make sure you are liking and subscribing and hitting that bell notification so you can get regular updates for when I put out new content. Post every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and sometimes I'll sprinkle in an additional release sometime throughout the week. Now that said, guys, today's book review is going to be Aching God by Mike Shel. And you ever just stumble across a book completely by accident? Well, that's what happened to me. I was just scrolling through the Kindle store, minding my own business, and then I see this kind of just interesting artwork, cover art. And so I click on it and I read the description and I'm like, oh, this sounds kind of like really kind of interesting. And essentially what it's like, oh, Ulrich was this, who was our main character, was this kind of Syriac knight who was basically a scholar slash knight slash treasure hunter slash whatever. And yeah, he had this PTSD thing and he retired and now he's being pulled back into his life and he's got to go into these cursed lands. And I was like, oh, this sounds kind of interesting. And so I just impulse clicked purchase. And then I was talking about it and some people in Discord and I was like, hey, anybody heard of this? And I guess it was, I'm going to get this wrong, an SPFBO, I think. It's the Mark Lawrence Self-Pub contest. It was a finalist, I think, back in 2018. And it didn't win, of course, but, you know, that it got me excited even further. So I was in various Discords, and, you know, somebody popped up and says, yeah, I've heard of it. And I was like, hey, do you want to buddy read it? And they're like, yeah, sure. So I decided to do this as a buddy read with just somebody in a Discord. And what ended up happening is we were like, yeah, we're just going to do a couple chapters a day. And that lasted for, I think, a week. And then, they came back and they were like, yeah, let's do 6 chapters a day. Let's just burn through this. This is so good. And I was just like, oh, yes, let's go faster. Anyway, that out of the way, this book was amazing. So essentially the setup here is we have Ulrich, who is this kind of 40, 50, grizzled, old, retired knight. He was a part of the Syriac League, which is basically almost this scholarly league. Essentially in this world, there was a group of ancients, an ancient people called the Jiao. And they were off in this little area of the continent before they fell. And they basically had gods that they worshipped. And the Jiao did something. It's not addressed, but basically the gods brought the Jiao low and wiped them out. And then time passed, and excavators and fortune and treasure hunters went into what is called the Barrowlands and rediscovered the Jiao ruins. And so then, they started taking relics and studying this culture and their magic and rediscover the gods this way. And you've got gods of healing, you've got gods of battle, you've got just gods, you've got trickster gods, all sorts of different gods here. And basically, a lot of the times, you know, going into these Jiao ruins is not safe. You know, that they are littered with just curses and undead, and it's very, very dangerous. And so the Barrowlands are actually sealed by royal decree. You can only get into these lands through a certain gate. I guess it's all walled off or it's all patrolled by royal decree, and you've got to pass sorcerers and get inspected and everything like that. It's very, very, very serious. And so that's kind of where the Syriac League comes in, and they're essentially these soldiers of fortune, but they're also scholars, and they promote learning. They've got sorcerers in the league and knights and alchemists. And these people formed up groups, and they go into the Barrowlands, and they retrieve these ancient relics that they can study and just kind of explore these old ruins. Well, anyway, basically, one of these groups brought back a relic 33 years prior, and they couldn't really figure out anything to do with it. A lot of people died on this expedition. Basically, once they brought the relic back, everybody in that group instantly retired. And they just kind of scattered. And the relic just kind of sat there inert. And then somebody randomly 33 years later cuts themselves on it and activates it. And all of a sudden, the Citadel, which is the Sarek headquarters, is just full of plague, and people are dying, and just weird, odd things are starting to happen. And so it is deemed that this item is cursed. The problem is because of the plague, most of the Sarek League dies. And so they call in a ringer. Essentially, you've got Sir Ulrich, who had retired 3 years prior after a bad experience in the Barrowlands. Essentially, he was just kind of found rambling and half mad, carrying around the head of his of one of his former expedition members, who was also his friend. And so he was kind of put out to pasture. But because his daughter is also a part of the Sarek League and has become basically in a coma, he is called in. Basically, he receives a letter, and they say, "Hey, we need you to come in. We need to talk to you about your daughter." And then he is apprised of the situation. So from there, he's kind of given the situation, and he agrees to go on just kind of one last excursion. It felt very kind of like... It almost felt like a medieval Indiana Jones type thing, but like with sorcery and God, and like, well, I guess Indiana Jones does have gods and aliens, if you count that movie. Which, I mean, it had John Hurt, so I hate to discount that movie, but anyway, it's not the point. It's not the point. We're not talking about Indiana Jones. We're talking about Aching God. He gets this group of people together. We get a sorcerer, we get a sellsword, we get mercenaries, we get sorcerers and healers, and just this ragtag group of basically what they can scrap together of the last good people. All these people are very, very flawed, but basically they go on and they start to do the whole found family trope and everything like that. It is such a good book. I love the found family aspect here. It leads to some really, really interesting moments. It also leads to some interesting tension. Now, this world, though, if it sounds a little dark, it's because it is. I don't know if I classify this as like dark fantasy, grim dark, fantasy horror, but basically the undead come into this a lot. And we learn a lot about Sir Ulrich, who is our POV character here, through flashbacks. Essentially, a lot of the chapters will start with a nightmare sequence, where he is back with his expeditionary team before his retirement, and we are kind of going through the events that had happened, but through a nightmare sequence. So, like, people long dead are, like, berating him, and he's witnessing all these horrible, just atrocious deaths, and just gruesome, and a lot of it is just really, really, really visual, and guttural, and visceral. We are also introduced to royalty and nobles, who are just a little bit wacky. They're a little bit crazy. They're a little bit twisted. Maybe even a little bit demented. We meet just people with all sorts of opinions on sorcerers, and we go on various other little adventures on our way to the Barrowlands to return the relic that caused all of the issues. Ultimately, we do get there, and this does feel like a very self-contained novel, but it is the first in a trilogy, so I'm super excited to see what the second book has for me next month. Pacing-wise, I never, ever, ever, ever felt bored here. It always has enough to keep you interested. The dialogue is witty, the repartee, I don't know, it's a fancy word. But the just overall banter really works here. We get great friendships. We just get a sense of unease in the pit of your stomach during certain scenes where you're just like, oh my gosh, no. Like, it is so good. This was a 5 out of 5 read for me. I cannot recommend this book enough. It is not long. It took me maybe 3 or 4 days after like I released the 1 to 2 chapter a day rule with my buddy Reed, and I just flew through this in about 3 days after that point. So it would take me about 3 or 4 days, just generally going at my regular pace here. All in all, I am so excited here to continue reading Mr. Mike Shel's work. Honestly, right now, he has shot straight to the top of my potential new favorite authors list. I can't believe it took me this long to figure out that this book even existed, and that he's just kind of flying under the radar here. It's frankly, I'm at a loss for words how much I enjoyed this book. I don't usually go for like horror per se in my fantasy, and this just worked for me. It was fun. It was just disturbing. It was adventurous. It was cool. It was 10 kinds of badass. It was just everything I never knew I wanted and more in a book. Honestly, 5 out of 5. I am super excited to really continue on in the Iconoclast trilogy. Now, that said, guys, that is the end of this book review. But in the comments down below, please let me know if you intend to pick up this book. If you've already read this book and your thoughts on it. Just whatever you want to talk about when it comes to the Aching God or the Iconoclast. Am I in for a even better ride here? I'm so excited. I don't know what to do with myself and why I can't calm down here. This is why I don't usually record immediately after finishing a book. That said, guys, I'm super excited here. I would love to talk with you about it. If you want to just talk regular books, check the description down below for the link to the Wizardly Duo Discord. I cannot wait to try and push this book to more readers. It is such an enjoyable read. So, till next time, guys, peace out. Stay magical. Bye.